So most of these fan games aren't critically acclaimed for their visual flair. More often than not, you'll just have fan games that attempt to replicate the look and feel of any one of the official Five Nights games, rather than trying something new. Of course, there are exceptions to this with games like Super FNAF and the upcoming Project Box. But yeah, back in 2015, One Night at Flumpty's was the game that broke the mold in not looking like this. This hot wet poo nugget was released on January 29th, so for the time, it was an especially unique little fan game that kinda just dropped out the stratosphere into what was at the time a pretty visually uninteresting melting pot of fan games. Apparently what began as an in-joke between friends creator Jonachrome turned into a fully fledged fan game. Now this dude has actually been making games and stuff for about 15 years with a pretty extensive portfolio actually, with One Night at Flumpty's being one of his later games. So like, what the hell even is this thing? Basically, it's Five Nights at Freddy's 1, except it's a cartoon fever dream where you're fighting an egg, Chibi Robo, Pennywise, Gygus, can't forget Gygus, and a beaver taking a shit. All in all, this game makes zero sense, and the game does not mess around. You click start, you survive one night, and you are finished. Game is over. No extra content. Remember what I said in the last episode of this series? The game definitely had its flaws, with the glaring issue being just how similar it played to that original Freddy's game. I myself looked at it more of like an intentional parody, rather than a unique fan game. Yeah, let me just get that into... This is the definition of parody. It takes the whole concept of sitting in the middle of a haunted restaurant with no way to defend yourself other than a pair of power-driven doors, and hardly does anything to change it because what a friggin' ridiculous concept in the first place, right? Flumpty's takes the heightened reality from Freddy's and just drives it into the ground. From an onlooker's perspective, yeah, the concept is dumb, and Flumpty's very appropriately takes that dumb concept further and injects it into something that doesn't take itself seriously in the slightest. And you know what? That totally works. Now, usually I'd bring up how the gameplay is different from FNAF, what it borrows and all that, but other than a slightly smaller map, it's essentially the exact same gameplay. Well, okay, it's slightly different. Now, you don't have windows this time around. If you want to check if there's anybody outside, you gotta open the door, which leaves you vulnerable to whatever may be lurking behind it, which is a good way of ramping up the difficulty. But other than that, yeah, it's pretty much one-to-one with Freddy's 1. The beaver essentially acts as Foxy, and he's really the only camera you ever need to check. There's even a golden Flumpty that behaves pretty much identical to Golden Freddy, except you can get rid of him by flipping the monitor. But even then, that's taken from FNAF 2. The only real difference is that at 4 AM, Cam 3 is unlocked, and you gotta deal with the Red Man, as he's referred to. But he plays identical to Flumpty and Birthday Boy Blam, so like, whatever. Oh, and also, I never had any trouble with him personally, but good golly if he didn't nearly indirectly kill me during the last 2 hours of my first playthrough. Grunkfuss the Clown will crawl out the wall in front of you, getting closer and closer the more you check the cameras. I think I never died to him. So yeah, deal with all that, survive until 6 AM, and feel accomplished in the fact that that was 10 minutes well spent. Yeah, 10 minutes is a very short game. My biggest complaint for a lot of these fan games is that the difficulty balancing makes things way too easy in the early nights and far too hard in later nights, but Flumpty's legitimately doesn't have this problem. I imagine it's far easier to perfect the difficulty for one night than having to account for newcomers, and also making things interesting enough for replay value, but the problem is, Five Nights at Freddy's games are nothing but replay value, because you're essentially playing the same game 5 times in a row, in turn giving them terrible replay value. What? But hey, One Night at Flumpty's doesn't have to deal with this, and plus this means there's a hell of a lot less burnout on the player's end. I definitely think that there are some decent fan games out there, but the ones that aren't the same game every night are the ones that are the most interesting to me. Flumpty's only has one night, but it uses it to its advantage by cramming everything it's got into that one night instead of drawing it out for 5, and for that I definitely appreciate it. Oh, and I should mention the plot of this game.
Hi, I'm Flumpty Bumpty. I'm an egg. I'm immune to the plot, and I can transcend time and space. Also, I'm coming after you. You can figure out the rest. Have fun.
Yeah, again, it's brilliantly stupid. Of course, the actual plot of this thing is that Flumpty Bumpty has kidnapped you and wants you to survive the night in order to become friends, but if you don't... He eats your eyes, man, that's mildly concerning. But while we're on the topic of this game over screen, it's pretty well drawn. In fact, I'd go a tad further and determine that this entire game is really well drawn. I mean, it's one thing to have an unorthodox art style in a game like this, but to have it look as good as this certainly takes skill. Some of the jump scare animations here too are really decent, and the fact that the moment they get you their design switches to looking far spookier is actually a helping hand in making this, ironically, a tad scary. Everything from the warning splash to the dumb references plastered everywhere, the game is played off as nothing but a dumb joke, but I don't know, making the jump scares actually scary in comparison does get you. So, overall, Flumpty's 1. It's not much, but what we do get is a glorious mockery of the first Freddy's game, and for that, yeah, it's pretty awesome. In all honesty, I do wish there was a bit more to it, like an extra mode or something, but for what it is, I had a good time with it. And yeah, this is one hell of a short review, but really there's not too much to discuss with it. Now Flumpty's 2, on the other hand, there's definitely a bit more going on, which I'll definitely go into a bit further. But yeah, that'll be the next Fangame review. But yeah, Flumpty's 1. Yep. Also, the game is in 16:9 aspect ratio, thank God.